At 11:59, Lane Whitaker's badge went dead with a soft beep against the glass door, like a mosquito hitting a windshield. Small, stupid, final. 32 years, gone in the time it takes to choke on lukewarm coffee. I watched from my desk, stunned stupid, as he stood there for half a second longer than usual, like maybe the badge just needed a second swipe. It didn't. Security didn't say a word. They just opened the side door and escorted him out like a delivery guy who showed up after hours. No goodbye, no send-off, just that empty chair and a monitor still glowing with his last login. I think my stomach dropped before the reality hit me. Because Lane wasn't just the cyber guy. Lane was the backbone. That morning, he did what he always did. Walked in early, brewed that bitter black sludge he called coffee, and swept through the overnight logs before most of us had even peeled off our seatbelts in the parking lot. I'd passed his desk around 8:17. He'd already responded to 3 tickets and flagged a broken checksum in one of our vendor logs. Calm, competent, quiet. Never dramatic, never loud. Just Lane. And then Travis happened. Travis, the CEO's freshly imported nephew from Miami Tech Bro U, strolled into the office like he'd been gifted the building in a trust fund. Aviators still on indoors, hair slicked back like he was auditioning for a shampoo commercial. I swear to God, the first thing he did after shaking hands was hand the receptionist a copy of 10 Ways to Identify Dead Weight in Your Org from his LinkedIn. By 10:30, he was holding culture fit assessments with 3 people from my team. By 11:40, Lane was called to HR for a brief personnel sync. We didn't even realize what was happening until we heard the badge beep. Pause for just 1 second here, because this is real. This story, it's not rare, and if you've ever worked somewhere long enough to feel safe, hit that subscribe button and give this a like. You won't believe how quickly that illusion of security can evaporate, and it really helps our team keep bringing these stories to life. Anyway, Lane didn't fight. He didn't raise his voice, just stood, handed over his badge, and walked out like a man leaving a burning house with no interest in saving the wallpaper. I remember thinking, he didn't even clear his desk. No box, no coat, no farewell wave, just gone. But the weirdest part? He knew. I swear to God he knew it was coming. He'd said something strange last week when we were talking about the new vendor certs. Something like, if they decide I'm too dusty, let's see how shiny it feels when things stop working. At the time, I thought it was a joke. Now I know it was a quiet warning. Because 5 minutes after that badge deactivated, a low priority alert pinged Legal's dashboard, named Security Contact, Invalid Authentication Detected. The status box blinked yellow. Nobody noticed. At 12:04 p.m., all hell broke loose. But before the panic, before the outage, before the call from the insurer, before we realized we were flying blind, I sat there, watching Lane's monitor go dark. And for the first time since I started at this company, I felt something cold creep under my skin. Not just fear, it was absence. That heavy, invisible vacuum that happens when the one person who actually knew how everything worked isn't there anymore. And none of us even thought to ask, what happens next? The door clicked shut behind him like a vault, sealing off the last goddamn whisper of logic in the building. No outburst, no raised voice, just Lane, stoic as ever, handing over his badge with the same calm hands that once patched us through an entire ransomware scare without breaking a sweat. Your institutional memory, Travis had said with that smug, paper-thin grin. But this isn't a museum. Like he was doing Lane a favor by dragging him out of the past. And Lane? He just nodded. One slow, eerie nod like he was already 10 steps ahead of us. Like he didn't need the job to walk out with his dignity intact. They say you don't notice the gears until the engine stalls. But I swear to God, the moment Lane disappeared, the whole floor shifted. Phones kept ringing. Emails kept coming. But something underneath, the bones of the place, cracked. Travis strutted around the office after, all puffed up in his thrift store startup blazer, telling us this was part of the right-sizing initiative, that the company needed to go lean to stay agile in a volatile market. He used words like synergy and cost cadence and looked at us like we were holding the business back just by aging past 30. Lane's chair sat empty all afternoon, still slightly turned toward the door, like he might stroll back in with a dry joke and a half-burnt thumb drive that'd save us from some lurking catastrophe. I think that's when it really hit me. Travis didn't even know what Lane did. He saw an old guy with quiet habits and zero flair and assumed he was dead weight. What he didn't see, what none of them saw, was that Lane wasn't just some relic. He was the connective tissue. He built half the damn protocols. Not just the public-facing ones either. The deep stuff. The parts that don't show up on org charts or vendor decks. Escalation paths. Root access fallback triggers. Silent escalation call trees. The ones you don't think about until something goes nuclear. And still, Lane didn't say a word. No hint. No smug farewell. He left everything in place. The password vault, the encrypted binder, even the post-it notes with redacted reminders taped to his monitor. He didn't warn us. He just walked. There's something cruel about that. Not petty. Just cold. Precise. The kind of quiet exit that only comes from someone who's done this mental math 100 times. He didn't fight for the job because he knew it was about to implode. He knew they were standing on a landmine with a stopwatch, and he didn't feel like reminding them which wire not to cut. Back at our desks, the air turned brittle. Someone made a joke about finally having room in the break fridge. No one laughed. Not really. Around 12:02, I noticed a pending workflow stall on the internal audit tracker. Nothing big. Just a gray spinning wheel where Lane's key usually authorized the confirmation. Then another. And another. Some part of my brain told me this wasn't a coincidence, but I brushed it off. I shouldn't have. Nobody should have. Because in exactly 2 minutes, that stupid little yellow box in legal's dashboard was about to start blinking. And when it did, it would be too late to ask questions. Because the only person with answers had just been erased from the system. By a boy in a blazer who thought job titles meant competence. At exactly 12:04 p.m., the entire system hiccuped. Just once, but loud enough to wake the dead. The file transfer queue stalled mid-push, right as a 1.7 malware client-side vulnerability patch was uploading to our East Coast servers. At first, it looked like a glitch. Then legal got a ping. Then IT. And then the warning popped up in the insurer portal like a live grenade. Security contact invalid. Policy status suspended. That was the moment the office officially stopped pretending everything was fine. I was on the 3rd floor when it hit. Walked into the shared analytics space with a coffee in one hand and a payroll escalation form in the other. I passed Doug from IT staring at a frozen terminal like he'd just seen it weep blood. Systems rejecting our credentials, he muttered without looking up. Can't complete the back-end auth handshake. That might as well have been Greek to most of the execs, but I knew what it meant. Lane's digital signature had been hard-coded into the compliance chain. He was the primary key for everything from breach escalation to indemnity confirmation. You don't just replace that. You don't even touch that unless you're suicidal. Or Travis. 2 floors up, legal was in full blind panic. I heard later they thought it was a system sync issue, then a license expiration, then a server time drift. They tried everything: manual override, role reassignment, temporary token elevation. But the system didn't budge. It kept spitting out the same message. Missing authorized contact, verification deferred, coverage paused. It didn't matter that half the people scrambling had C-suite titles. The insurer didn't care. They only cared about the one name on file, Lane Whitaker. And Travis? That little peacock had no idea anything was wrong. He was still floating around the HR floor, high on the dopamine of his first decisive personnel move. He had probably already drafted the LinkedIn post in his head. Tough calls make great companies, or whatever insufferable garbage he picked up from a Gary V podcast. Meanwhile, legal was drafting emails with the subject line, urgent, contract breach risk. No one had realized the problem yet. Not fully. The alerts were there. Compliance clocks ticking, workflows halting, even the finance team whispering about escrow confirmations hanging midair. But it hadn't clicked. Because people like Travis think insurance is just paperwork. They think coverage is a sticker you slap on a pitch deck, not a living, breathing contract built on names, keys, timestamps. And right now, that contract had a hole the size of Travis's ego, and his name wasn't on the rescue list. I walked past the glass-walled conference room and saw our interim GC with her palms on the table, whispering hard into a burner phone. That's never good. The kind of whisper where you're praying no one hears the word regulators. A junior finance associate ran by holding a printed out screenshot, something about a failed attestation loop. And then, the final gut punch. Our third-party compliance vendor pinged back. Escalation protocol flagged. Retrying confirmation. Contact not found. You could feel the shift. Like watching someone drown in a shallow pool, there's splashing, but no one's smart enough to reach in. I looked around at the sea of spreadsheets and LED lights and thought, they still don't know what they broke. They really think this is just a bug. But it wasn't. It was a loaded gun Lane left on the table, safety off, pointed at the one part of the company nobody ever looks at, the paperwork behind the promises. And Travis had just pulled the trigger. By 12:23, the panic had evolved from, "This is weird," to, "Someone call the damn insurer." Half the exec floor was on mute in emergency Slack huddles. Legal was chain-refreshing policy terms like their lives depended on it, because they kinda did. And our systems were blinking in dead-eyed purgatory, stuck between request and response. The breach detection module hadn't even fired, but everyone could feel it. Something was broken, and no one knew where the fix was buried. That's when the first domino fell. Someone, probably from legal, though no one wanted to admit it, dug into the cyber insurance portal trying to manually update the contact info. They opened the credential mapping tab and saw it. Lane Whitaker. Not once. Not just as a name in the corner of a PDF, but hard-coded into the attestation chain, escalation ladder, indemnity trigger tree, and worst of all, into the regulator-facing certification node. There was no backup, no deputy, no secondary signer with mirrored privileges. Lane wasn't just the contact. Lane was the protocol. That's when someone asked the question that turned my stomach cold. Wait, is he freelance now? It wasn't even said with malice, just confusion, naivety, a vague hope that maybe, somehow, Lane had landed soft, and we could bribe him with a coffee and a thank you card to come back and untangle the knots. But then Travis opened his smug little mouth and sealed our fate. He was just the checklist guy, he shrugged, standing there like a kid who'd just kicked over a Jenga tower and didn't understand why the room had gone quiet. All that risk stuff's templated, right? I swear the room lost 5 degrees. Across from me, one of the junior IT staffers, Emily, fresh out of Georgia Tech, sharp as hell but barely 3 months in, gasped. Not a dramatic, cinematic gasp. Just that involuntary gulp you make when you realize the adults in the room are not in control. She looked at me, pale. "Checklist guy," she whispered. "He wrote the 0-day workflow, from scratch." I nodded, but I think I was already numb, because she was right. Lane didn't use checklists, he wrote them. The ones our third-party vendors built their protocols around. The ones compliance auditors had complimented last fall. Hell, he had a flowchart on the wall behind his monitor that looked like a cross between a subway map and a Cold War fallout plan, and every line led back to him. Legal tried patching it. They brought in DevOps to spoof the digital signature, thinking maybe the system wouldn't notice. It did. It always does. Then they tried switching the contact email, re-authenticating the 2FA path, even issuing a provisional key. No dice. Because Lane had set it up to detect policy tampering in real time. You couldn't just swap out the nameplate and hope the locks stayed open. Meanwhile, our senior compliance liaison, the guy on the board who's supposed to oversee risk continuity, was somewhere on a fishing boat off the coast of Maine, completely unreachable. And the CISO, sabbatical in New Zealand. Deputy CISO, no credentials elevated. The only person who could fix this was sitting God knows where with a deactivated badge and a perfect record of not giving a single damn. That's when Emily said the thing none of us wanted to hear. If we don't get Lane, we're out of coverage. The room went still. Everyone knew what that meant, even if Travis didn't. No coverage meant no shield, no indemnity, no legal buffer if a breach hit. And we were mid-transfer on a compliance payload with federal audit implications. The silence thickened. I looked at Travis. He was blinking fast now. "This isn't that bad," he mumbled, eyes darting. "We can just, I don't know, call support or something. It's all on file." That's when Emily, soft-spoken, still pale, said it clear. "It's not on file. Lane was the file." Lane was sitting in a booth at Millie's Diner, back corner by the jukebox, same place he always went when the office tried his patience, which, to be fair, wasn't often. He was sipping burnt decaf and picking at a plate of eggs like it was any other Thursday. No fanfare, no phone calls, no pacing around or vengeance plotting, just quiet, measured stillness. He had a paperback spy novel on the table, dog-eared, spine cracked, and his phone face down beside it like it was optional. The man had just been fired after 32 years, and he looked more relaxed than Travis did on casual Fridays. Around 12:41, his phone buzzed. Just once. No ringtone, no second vibration, one message from a number saved only as Allie Intern. I don't know what she wrote exactly, but she told me later it was simple. Just, please help. Something broke. Lane read it once, sipped his coffee, and tapped out a reply that would go on to haunt the entire executive team for the next 36 hours. I'd have answered, if I were employed. 9 words. Not angry, not desperate, just surgical, like a scalpel slicing through delusion. Allie didn't even mean to start the fire. She just screenshotted it and forwarded it to her supervisor with a nervous, "What do I do?" By 1:06 p.m., that image had traveled to 3 department heads, 5 directors, and 2 executive assistants. By 1:17, it landed in the inbox of Greg Winslow, a board member, and the only one who'd ever taken Lane out for a beer during audit week. Greg didn't reply to the email. He just forwarded it to the CEO with the subject line, "Are you aware this is the current state of affairs?" I was on the floor when the CEO walked out of his office, holding his phone like it had personally insulted his stock portfolio. He looked around, first for Travis, who was nowhere to be found, and then for anyone who could explain how our entire digital infrastructure was now tied up over a man we'd escorted out without so much as a cupcake. Legal tried to spin it, said it wasn't technically a breach yet, said maybe Lane would reconsider helping if we framed it as a consulting opportunity. But every attempt was a guess, because Lane wasn't replying to anyone else. Not emails, not calls, not Slack, just that one message. And it was already framed on half the office's private group chats like a warning etched in stone. What really cracked me, though, was how quiet the panic was. Nobody ran. Nobody screamed. But the tension, God, you could feel it, like the building itself was holding its breath. Systems blinking red, compliance certs half signed, the insurer's portal locked behind a dead credential. Travis was still pretending it was just a glitch, trying to blame IT for overcomplicating the fallback procedures. But he was sweating now, forehead shiny, collar unbuttoned, chewing gum like it was a stress ball. And Lane? Lane was refilling his coffee. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need a mic drop email or a LinkedIn tell-all. The building was doing the screaming for him. Every paused transaction, every stuck verification loop, every unreadable log file was a megaphone broadcasting his absence louder than any farewell speech ever could. That one text, that one line. It traveled faster than a fire alarm, and somewhere, sipping lukewarm diner coffee with a book in his lap, Lane just waited. At 2:07 p.m., legal found it. A clause buried so deep in the insurer contract that it took 2 lawyers and 1 compliance associate with a magnifying glass to spot it. Section 14, Subpart E, line 11. We all know Lane was methodical, but this wasn't just meticulous. This was surgical booby-trapping with a lawyer's precision and a chess player's foresight. The clause read, "Any modification, substitution, or removal of the named security contact shall require a minimum 10 business days written notice and formal written approval by the insurer. Failure to comply renders the policy inactive until such approval is received." 10 days. Written notice, formal approval. We didn't give him 10 seconds. What made it worse? Lane had initialed the clause, in ink, not just on the PDF. The original hard copy in Legal's vault had a handwritten note in the margin. No unilateral substitutions. Protect continuity. The silence that followed wasn't professional. It was funereal. The general counsel dropped the binder and just muttered, "We are so," before cutting herself off. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. That's when the email from ArcadiaNet came in, our cybersecurity solutions vendor and the linchpin for our next $12.5 million expansion contract. Their wording was concise and devastating. In light of your current gap in indemnity coverage and the unresolved breach of continuity clause in your insurer protocol, we are formally withdrawing from negotiations. Please do not contact our team until the matter is rectified in full. I watched Travis read it over the GC's shoulder. His eyes didn't blink. His mouth didn't move. It was like watching someone suddenly realize they'd accidentally unpinned the grenade they were using as a paperweight. He broke his trance only to fumble for his phone, thumb jittering across the screen until he found Lane's number. He hit call and held it up to his ear like it was a lifeline. A few seconds passed. Then Lane's voicemail kicked in, his usual blunt greeting, dry and empty of comfort. "You've reached Lane Whitaker. If I didn't answer, I had a reason." No beep, no option to leave a message. The mailbox was full. Travis stood there, arms still raised, face slowly contorting into a mask of useless panic. Then he redialed. Same result. He tried Slack, disconnected, texted, no read receipts. The man they dismissed as just the checklist guy had become a ghost with the keys to the entire kingdom, and nobody knew how to summon him back. From my desk, I could see the board liaison on a Zoom call, whispering furiously into his mic while pointing at a printout of the clause. A few seats over, someone from finance was combing through Q3 contracts, redlining everything with a compliance dependency. You could feel the weight of it sinking in, not just that we were exposed, but that Lane made sure we'd know it. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't pettiness. Lane hadn't changed anything. He'd just built the structure right, and they'd ripped out the foundation thinking it was wallpaper. Now the building was tilting. Travis tried one last time. He even borrowed the GC's phone, thinking maybe Lane had blocked him specifically. But that call went to voicemail too. And still, Lane said nothing. No email, no note, just the clause, sitting there like a ticking clock with no snooze button. Every minute that passed, the policy stayed suspended. Every minute, risk exposure crept higher, and every damn person in that office began to realize the same cold, sharp truth. You don't just fire the guy who wrote the manual, you consult him before you even touch the binder. The emergency board session was called for 3:30. By 3:08, half the exec team was already in the room, staring at each other like survivors of a shipwreck still clinging to business casual name tags. The CFO looked like he hadn't blinked since lunch, sweat bleeding through his collar as he clicked through a screen share with one trembling finger. On it, the frozen payment queue, $6.1 million installed transactions, with compliance flags blinking like hazard lights at every row. Then he opened the insurer portal, or tried to. Spinning wheel, then access denied. Then a full lockout banner. No active security contact. Attestation pending. Policy hold. He didn't speak. He just clicked to the final tab, a deadline reminder glowing red at the top. Final Q4 attestation report. Due today, signature required. Underneath, Whitaker, L, no proxy, no override. That was the moment the air left the room. Not just a breath, oxygen. Gone. The GC muttered something about clause escalation, but it came out dry and hollow. Travis tried to blame IT backlog again, but even he didn't believe it anymore. The truth was bare and ugly now. Lane hadn't built the system to fail. He'd built it to require trust. And they had kicked that trust out the damn door with a cardboard box and a 26-year-old LinkedIn fanatic. A junior partner on the Zoom call broke the silence first. Her voice was low, barely audible through the mic lag, but it might as well have been a gunshot. We're exposed. Not at risk. Not potential liability. Exposed. Naked in the wind. One subpoena away from a full-bore regulatory cavity search, and the one person who could plug the hole was sitting somewhere with his phone set to do not care. Until it rang. Lane was still in the diner. Still in that corner booth. Still sipping the same refill of lukewarm decaf. His phone lit up with a number he hadn't seen since the last year's QBR, the CEO himself. He let it ring twice, then 3, then 4. And just when you'd think he might let it go to voicemail and let the dread marinate another few minutes, he answered, mid-sip, calm as a man flipping to the next chapter of a mediocre mystery novel. Yes, that's all. No greeting. No, hello? No, this is Lane, just yes, as in, I know who you are, I know why you're calling, and I've been waiting to see how long it would take you to figure it out. The CEO cleared his throat. Twice. Lane, there's been some confusion. Lane didn't respond. I think you're aware we're having a situation with our policy alignment. Lane didn't respond. We would appreciate your insight, your assistance, if you're willing. Still nothing. Then Lane set his mug down, slow, deliberate, porcelain clinking against laminated wood, and in the kind of voice that could gut a man without raising the volume, he said, "What exactly are you asking for?" Silence. Then mumbling. Then the CEO tried again. "We'd like to resolve this quickly. Would you be open to discussing a short-term return? Consultant, maybe." Lane breathed once through his nose. This isn't short-term, and it's not a return. He didn't hang up. He didn't yell. He just let the silence spread like a slow gas leak through the boardroom speakerphone. Somewhere on the Zoom call, someone whispered, "Just give him what he wants." Lane heard it. Everyone heard it. Because by now, the real power had shifted. And Lane? Lane didn't have to lift a finger. He was already winning. The official offer came through at 4:11 p.m. wrapped in a flurry of NDAs, HR override forms, and an emergency contractor authorization memo that looked like it had been whipped together with the desperation of a man trying to tape a dam back together. But Lane didn't respond right away. He took his time, finished his eggs, wiped his hands on a paper napkin, and then called their bluff. His reply came in the form of a single PDF, written and signed with digital precision, time-stamped, encrypted, and sent from a secure portal legal had never seen before. It wasn't a resume. It was a terms sheet. No negotiation, no room for back and forth. Just 4 bullet points, bolded and unflinching. Retainer at double his former salary, paid quarterly, with no clawbacks regardless of outcome. Title, Cyber Sovereign. Not director, not officer. Sovereign. Unreportable, uneditable, unoverridden, zero oversight, no dotted lines, no approvals, no status updates, and specifically, no contact with or reporting to Travis Ellison in any form, direct or indirect. Addendum. Termination may not occur without 90 days written notice and express consent of full board quorum, excluding CEO. Attached beneath was a final sentence in small print. Upon receipt of the signed agreement, I will sign the attestation and restore policy access within 8 minutes. The board read it. No one said a word. Then the CEO, eyes hollow, voice flat, clicked open DocuSign and signed, without blinking, without comment, without so much as a breath of resistance. And just like that, the game reset. Lane wasn't returning. He was ascending. The attestation was submitted at 4:19 p.m. The policy reactivated at 4:22. The insurer's dashboard lit up green, the indemnity flag cleared, and the frozen transactions began to move again. The payment queue resumed. Vendor channels reopened. The audit clock reset. And Travis? By 5 p.m., his calendar was cleared. A quiet team alignment notice went out by email, stating he'd be transitioning to a strategic observational role, code for corporate Siberia. They gave him a badge that didn't open anything and an office with no windows. His Slack permissions evaporated overnight. The only title left under his name was Special Advisor to Non-Core Initiatives, which meant precisely nothing. He didn't fight it. How could he? The same people who let him run wild in the morning were now pretending he'd never been there. HR purged his efficiency roadmap folder. Legal scrubbed his edits from the SOP archive. No one wanted to be on record defending the guy who almost torpedoed the company because he thought institutional memory sounded dusty. And Lane? He never came back to the office, never reclaimed his desk. He didn't want the water cooler chats or the welcome back cake. His work came in encrypted packets from a remote server. His login now bypassed every traditional approval chain. If you needed him, you submitted a formal request through a secure portal labeled only Sovereign Access. He didn't ask for power. He designed the system so it had to return to him. And now? Now he didn't just have leverage. He was the fail-safe. The following Monday, a plaque appeared next to the reinforced steel door leading into the main server room. Brushed aluminum, etched in bold sans serif, mounted just below the access reader. Security begins with accountability in honor of Lane Whitaker, Cyber Sovereign. No ribbon cutting, no ceremony, just a quiet gesture, approved unanimously by the board and installed at dawn by facilities before most staff had even unlocked their screens. That was the thing about Lane. He didn't need applause. His presence was architectural, not performative. You didn't see him work. You just watched things not collapse and only realized how much he held up when it all cracked at once. His desk was cleared out by then. Not by HR, by a facilities specialist who'd been given exact digital instructions via encrypted link. Everything removed with surgical care. His nameplate? Gone. Monitor wiped. Not a trace left in the building, except one thing. A single sticker left on the underside of his keyboard tray. Small, faded, but still legible. It read, "Structure is silent until tested." The insurance documents were updated that afternoon. Under named security contact, the field no longer showed a typical title. Instead, in all caps, bolded and underlined, it read, Lane Whittaker, Cyber Sovereign. Beneath that, in smaller text, Authorized Autonomous Agent. No internal overrides permitted. No one questioned it. The next quarterly audit came faster than expected. State regulators doing a spot inspection after a sudden shift in compliance designations. Normally, those things were chaos, scrambling to match logs with protocols, C-suite suits trying to remember who was responsible for what. But this time, when the lead auditor reached that part of the checklist and asked the question, standard, emotionless, procedural, who's your contact of record for breach response, indemnity certification, and attestation authority? The room didn't hesitate. No one stammered. No one looked confused. Everyone just turned toward the wall screen. On it, plain and piercing, the same portal that had frozen the company mid-function now sat fully lit. A single field blinked softly under contact of record. Bolded. Underlined. Lane Whittaker. The auditor nodded. Is he on site? The CEO, hair grayer now, voice quieter, shook his head. No, he said, then paused, just long enough to let it land. He's not on site. He's above the policy now. And that was it. No fanfare, no redemption speech, just the quiet permanence of someone who built his power so thoroughly into the system that firing him didn't remove him. It proved him. The kind of man you don't just replace, you re-sign, at double, and you pray he answers.